along the peninsula, and they're attracting people from all walks of life. Night Beat's Joe Vasquez is in San Mateo County with the staggering new numbers.
3 million evictions last year, rents averaging over $2,000, home prices above $420,000. These aren't just numbers. They're the reasons families across America are turning to RVs and vans as their last option. Today, we're exposing the shocking rise of RV homelessness and why it could happen to anyone. Let's get rolling. The American dream of homeownership is crumbling, with median home prices soaring above $420,000, up from $275,000 just 10 years ago. Millions of families find themselves permanently locked out of the housing market.
It has become the skid row for RV homelessness in LA County. People without a home living in hundreds of RVs.
The math is brutal. Purchasing a typical home now requires an annual income of at least $120,000, while most American households earn only around $75,000. This isn't just about inflation. It's a systemic breakdown caused by restrictive zoning laws that limit construction, corporate investors buying up affordable properties for rentals, and chronic housing shortages. The consequences are devastating. Working families who once expected to own homes are now trapped in expensive rental markets or forced into increasingly precarious living situations. Perhaps most troubling is the rise of RV homelessness, where people live in old motorhomes, vans, and trailers not by choice, but because it's their only remaining option. This crisis represents a fundamental shift in American society. What was once a reasonable expectation for middle-class families has become a luxury reserved for the wealthy. Without significant policy changes to increase housing supply and control speculation, an entire generation may remain permanently shut out of homeownership, reshaping the economic and social fabric of the country. If buying a home seems impossible, renting offers little relief. National average rent has skyrocketed to over $2,050 per month in 2025, nearly double the $1,050 average from just 15 years ago.
Low-income housing is not only beginning to be a real problem in the United States, but everyone is starting to see symptoms of it, and Los Angeles is a prime example of that.
Cities like Austin, Phoenix, and Tampa have seen rents jump more than 40% in 5 years alone, while even small towns that were once affordable refuges now mirror urban pricing. The financial reality is crushing. To afford typical rent without being rent-burdened, Americans need to earn about $82,000 annually, following the standard rule that housing shouldn't exceed 30% of income. Yet nearly half of all workers make less than $50,000 per year, forcing millions of families to spend over half their paycheck just on shelter. This impossible equation is driving more Americans into RV living. Old motorhomes and trailers parked along roadsides or in budget campgrounds have become cheaper alternatives to traditional apartments, even factoring in fuel and maintenance costs. What once represented vacation freedom now serves as many people's last line of defense against complete homelessness. America faces a housing emergency where neither owning nor renting remains accessible to working families, fundamentally altering how and where people can afford to live. Beyond skyrocketing housing costs, the basic expenses of daily life have become financially devastating for American families. Even as inflation supposedly cooled, prices for essentials remain 15 to 20% higher than before the pandemic. A gallon of milk that cost $2.90 in 2019 now averages $4, while grocery bills for a typical family often exceed $1,000 monthly. Utilities compound the crisis. Electricity costs have jumped nearly 25% since 2020, with natural gas and water rates continuing to climb. Combined with rising medical care, insurance premiums, and transportation expenses, many families watch their entire paycheck vanish within days of receiving it. For households already drowning in rent or mortgage payments, these inflationary pressures become the breaking point. When forced to choose between housing, food, and utilities, families increasingly sacrifice the home itself. This impossible math drives more Americans into motorhomes and vans, not as an adventure, but as a desperate cost-cutting measure. Yet vehicle living creates its own financial burdens through fuel, maintenance, and limited access to basic services. What appears to be a solution often becomes another trap, highlighting how America's cost of living crisis has eliminated viable options for millions of working families simply trying to survive. While costs have soared across every aspect of American life, paychecks have barely budged. Average wage growth has slumped to under 3% annually in 2025, while housing, food, and utilities have jumped by double digits over recent years. The math is devastating. A worker earning $50,000 in 2020 would need over $60,000 today just to maintain the same purchasing power, yet most have received raises of only a few $1,000s, if any. This wage stagnation creates an impossible squeeze. Even full-time workers find their entire paychecks consumed by basic necessities: rent, healthcare, transportation, and groceries, with nothing left for emergencies or savings. The promise that steady employment provides stability has been shattered. Corporate profits hit record highs while workers' real income shrinks, exposing a fundamental disconnect in the American economy. For millions, stagnant wages become the invisible force pushing them out of traditional housing. When full-time employment can't cover rising rents or mortgages, families increasingly turn to RVs and vans as their only affordable option. Vehicle living may reduce monthly expenses, but it represents a troubling reality. Working full-time in America no longer guarantees access to safe, stable housing. It's not a lifestyle choice. It's economic survival in a system that has abandoned working families. America's housing crisis reached a devastating milestone in 2024 with over 3 million eviction filings, numbers rivaling the 2008 financial crisis. Rising rents, stagnant wages, and persistent inflation have created a perfect storm where millions of families live one missed paycheck away from homelessness.
Homelessness is on the rise across America. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, more than 580,000 people experienced homelessness on one night in January last year. And the problem?
Overwhelmed eviction courts now process hundreds of cases daily, often spending less than 5 minutes determining each family's fate. The aftermath is brutal. Evicted families rarely find affordable alternatives in their communities, while emergency shelters overflow with months-long wait lists. For many, the only remaining option is moving into a vehicle, transforming old motorhomes, vans, and deteriorating campers into makeshift homes parked in lots, along roadsides, and in growing encampments. This displacement is driving the explosion of RV homelessness across America. Some families view vehicle living as temporary while searching for stability. Others find it becomes their permanent reality, marked by constant relocations and the ever-present threat of citations or towing. Evictions don't simply end rental agreements, they catapult people into an entirely different, precarious existence. What was once considered recreational vehicle use has become emergency housing for families with nowhere else to turn in America's increasingly unforgiving housing market. America's housing emergency extends far beyond what official statistics reveal. While attention focuses on visible street homelessness, a massive, disguised homelessness crisis affects over 1.5 million Americans living in cars, vans, and RVs.
Homelessness is not a new issue, but it is one that often doesn't receive a lot of attention. The number of Americans living without homes, in shelters, or on the streets continues to rise at an alarming rate.
Because they have some form of shelter, these families are often excluded from homeless counts, masking the true scale of housing displacement. These households exist in a precarious limbo, parking in Walmart lots, friends' driveways, or temporary campgrounds while constantly moving to avoid citations or complaints. Though they have 4 walls, the reality is harsh. No legal address, unstable shelter, and limited access to basic sanitation or reliable electricity. The human cost is devastating. Children face disrupted education as families relocate frequently, while parents balance employment with the constant anxiety of being ordered to move. Many live in deteriorating RVs lacking running water or proper heating, technically housed but fundamentally homeless. This hidden crisis represents homelessness in disguise. Old motorhomes may provide minimal shelter, but they're often unsafe and inadequate for long-term living. As housing costs continue rising faster than wages, this invisible population grows rapidly, revealing how America's affordability crisis has pushed millions into a shadow existence that official counts fail to capture. The crisis is larger than we measure, and it's accelerating. Social media paints a seductive picture of vehicle living. Hashtag van life influencers sipping artisanal coffee in Instagram-perfect renovated vans, posing at scenic overlooks, and celebrating freedom from conventional life. The glossy aesthetic suggests liberation from mortgages and mundane routines. But this curated fantasy masks a harsh truth. For every person who chooses the road for adventure, Thousands more are forced into vehicles by economic desperation. This is the cruel illusion of choice. While influencers monetize wanderlust, most Americans turning to RVs, vans, and cars today aren't documenting scenic travels. They're desperately searching for safe parking spots, affordable campgrounds, and places where police won't issue citations or demand they move along. The reality of RV homelessness bears little resemblance to social media mythology. These families aren't escaping the 9-to-5 grind by choice. They've been systematically priced out of housing. Their vehicles aren't symbols of freedom. They're the last fragile barrier between keeping their lives together and complete street homelessness. The growing divide is stark. A privileged few profit from romanticizing vehicle living, while countless families struggle to survive in the same conditions. For them, there are no mountain sunrises or lifestyle brands, just the daily challenge of finding somewhere safe to park while maintaining jobs, school, and dignity in an increasingly hostile environment. As vehicle living surges out of economic necessity, America's response has been disturbingly punitive. Over 100 cities have enacted ordinances restricting or banning overnight parking for cars, vans, and RVs by 2025.
In Los Angeles, a place to park is fast becoming a place to start over for thousands of people there living in RVs. CBS's Danya Bacchus shows us how some...
Rather than addressing housing affordability, these laws criminalize the survival strategies of families who have nowhere else to go. The consequences are devastating. For people already pushed to society's margins, losing their vehicle through fines, harassment, or towing means losing their last remaining shelter. Authorities justify these measures as protecting public safety or neighborhood character, but critics rightfully point out they do nothing to create affordable housing. They simply make poverty invisible. RV dwellers find themselves trapped in exhausting cycles of constant relocation, moving every few hours to avoid citations. Campgrounds that once offered refuge now charge $50 to $90 per night, unaffordable for families already struggling financially. Daily life becomes a cat-and-mouse game with law enforcement, where survival itself is treated as criminal behavior. This collision between rising RV homelessness and punitive policies reveals a cruel contradiction. Cities would rather spend resources punishing displaced families than addressing the housing crisis that created the problem. The result is a system that traps people between poverty and punishment, ensuring their desperation remains hidden rather than solved. The reality of vehicle homelessness bears no resemblance to glossy social media images. Most displaced families aren't living in pristine custom vans. They're surviving in deteriorating motorhomes and travel trailers that are 20 to 30 years old or more. These aging vehicles were never intended as permanent housing, and decades of wear have made them genuinely dangerous. The hazards are frightening. Brittle electrical wiring sparks fires, leaking plumbing breeds toxic mold, and failing engines strand families in isolated, unsafe locations. Many lack functioning climate control, creating life-threatening conditions. Interior temperatures can exceed 100 degrees in summer, while broken winter heating forces families toward deadly alternatives like propane heaters or jury-rigged electrical systems that risk carbon monoxide poisoning and fires. Maintenance becomes impossible when every dollar goes toward survival necessities. A failing transmission, leaking roof, or broken furnace simply can't be repaired when families must choose between fixes and food. These vehicles become ticking time bombs, providing minimal shelter today while threatening catastrophic failure tomorrow. For families experiencing RV homelessness, their home is simultaneously their salvation and their greatest vulnerability. They're trapped in deteriorating shells that could collapse at any moment, leaving them with absolutely nothing. It's not just housing insecurity, it's living with the constant threat that their last refuge could vanish without warning, pushing them into complete destitution. Among America's most devastating housing statistics is this: over 250,000 children are spending their nights in cars, vans, and RVs in 2025. For these kids, childhood has been stripped of its most basic foundations: stability, routine, and the security of knowing where they'll sleep each night. Education becomes nearly impossible. Families experiencing RV homelessness move constantly to avoid citations or because campgrounds exceed their budgets, making consistent school enrollment a fantasy. Children miss weeks or months of classes, and those who do attend face insurmountable obstacles. No internet access for homework, no quiet study space, no reliable meals. Teachers increasingly report these vehicle-dwelling students as high dropout risks. The emotional damage runs deeper than academic setbacks. Children endure crushing embarrassment when classmates discover they live in a motorhome rather than a house, leading to isolation and profound anxiety. Basic childhood needs, regular showers, proper nutrition, consistent medical care, become luxuries dependent on finding the right parking spot or affordable campground. This isn't just an economic crisis, it's generational trauma in the making. The instability these children experience today will shape their futures for decades. Vehicle homelessness has transformed from an adult survival strategy into a childhood-defining experience, creating lasting impacts that extend far beyond the immediate housing emergency. America is failing its most vulnerable citizens at the most critical stage of their lives. The promise of a secure retirement has crumbled for millions of older Americans. Social Security benefits average just $1,900 monthly in 2025. A sum that might have provided modest comfort decades ago, but can't compete with today's $2,000 plus average rents. After working entire lifetimes, seniors are discovering that traditional housing has become financially impossible. This harsh reality is driving a tragic wave of elderly Americans into aging motorhomes, travel trailers, and vans. What was once marketed as retirement adventure, touring the country in an RV, has transformed into economic desperation. Instead of scenic national parks, these seniors find themselves parked in discount lots, truck stops, and dangerous roadside areas, simply trying to survive. The daily choices are heartbreaking. Fixed incomes force seniors to decide between prescription medications, groceries, or gasoline to keep their vehicle operational. Medical emergencies become potential catastrophes without adequate savings or insurance coverage. Basic maintenance on aging RVs often goes undone, creating dangerous living conditions for people with limited mobility and health issues. The peaceful golden years promised to previous generations have been replaced by a brutal reality. Thousands of elderly Americans spending their final decades in deteriorating vehicles, fighting to maintain dignity, while society fails to provide the security they earned through lifetimes of work. America's retirement system has abandoned those who built it. When families are priced out of traditional housing, buying an old motorhome often feels like their last hope for shelter. But the RV market targeting desperate buyers has become a predatory trap designed to exploit vulnerability rather than provide solutions. Buy here, pay here. RV dealerships have exploded across America, offering financing on aging rigs that would sell for a few $1,000s cash. These lots prey on families with nowhere else to turn, advertising low monthly payments while hiding the devastating fine print. Interest rates typically range from 15 to 20%, far above traditional lending, transforming a $15,000 motorhome into a $30,000 plus financial nightmare. The vehicles themselves are disasters waiting to happen. Decades-old rigs with concealed mechanical failures, structural damage, and safety hazards. Buyers quickly discover they're paying thousands more than their deteriorating RV is worth while facing constant, expensive repairs they can't afford. The inevitable outcome is repossession, leaving families not only homeless but drowning in debt. This creates a vicious cycle. Lose the RV, damage credit further, then desperately finance another failing vehicle at even worse terms. Rather than providing lifelines, predatory RV lending has transformed vehicle homelessness into a revolving door of financial exploitation, trapping the most vulnerable Americans in endless cycles of debt and instability. Desperation has become a profitable business model. At $4.20 per gallon for gasoline and even higher diesel prices, mobility has transformed from freedom into financial imprisonment for families living in vehicles. Large, aging RVs averaging 6 to 8 miles per gallon require over $200 to fill their tanks, a crushing expense for people already surviving on the margins. This creates a vicious paradox. Families experiencing RV homelessness need to move frequently to avoid citations, harassment, or unsafe conditions. But every relocation devours their limited resources. Many become stranded in dangerous areas, unable to afford fuel to reach campgrounds, job sites, or even grocery stores. The very mobility that once defined RV living has become prohibitively expensive. The financial strain forces impossible choices. Some families skip essential maintenance, risking catastrophic breakdowns that could leave them with no shelter at all. Others sacrifice food or medications to afford gasoline, trading immediate health for the ability to move when threatened with citations. While wealthy RV enthusiasts may view rising fuel costs as mere inconvenience, low-income families living in aging motorhomes face potential disaster with each price increase. What should be a tool of freedom has become another chain binding people to poverty. High fuel prices don't just limit travel, they trap vulnerable families in cycles of immobility and desperation, making bad situations worse. For years, Campground served as crucial affordable housing for families living in RVs. Simple sites with basic hookups once rented for $20 to $25 nightly, providing a legal, safe alternative to escalating urban rents. But by 2025, this vital safety net has been priced out of reach for those who need it most. Campground fees now typically range from $50 to $90 per night, with premium locations exceeding $100. Even state parks, traditionally the affordable option, have raised rates to match soaring demand. The math is devastating. $60 nightly adds up to nearly $1,800 monthly, often exceeding apartment rents that families couldn't afford in the first place. This pricing surge forces RV-dwelling families into increasingly desperate situations. Unable to afford legitimate campgrounds, they're pushed into parking lots, rest areas, and illegal roadside pull-offs that lack basic sanitation, running water, or electricity. These unsafe locations compound the already serious risks of living in aging, deteriorating motorhomes. Campgrounds once represented a middle ground, legal shelter with community and basic services. Now they've become another casualty of America's affordability crisis, pricing out the very families who need them most. With campground costs rising as fast as housing, even the traditional budget option has become a luxury, leaving RV homeless families with nowhere safe to legally park. The trajectory is ominous. Without dramatic intervention, experts predict millions more Americans could be forced into vehicles by decade's end as housing prices continue outpacing wages. Rather than addressing root causes, many cities are intensifying punitive measures, expanding parking bans, conducting mass towing operations, and issuing citations to families with no alternatives. This approach promises to accelerate displacement rather than solve it. Several futures are emerging. Corporate interests may formalize mobile communities by purchasing land for fee-based permanent RV parks, potentially creating profit-driven housing for the displaced. A darker scenario envisions a massive, invisible underclass trapped in deteriorating motorhomes, too large to ignore yet systematically excluded from mainstream society. But alternatives exist. Strategic investment in vacant land development, tiny home projects, and robust affordable housing programs could eliminate the need for families to rely on aging RVs as primary shelter. The technology and resources exist. What's missing is political will. America stands at a crossroads. The choice is stark. Continue criminalizing poverty while allowing the crisis to metastasize, or implement comprehensive solutions that restore housing dignity for working families. The decisions made in the next few years will determine whether we're witnessing a temporary emergency or the birth of a permanent humanitarian catastrophe. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice matters. And don't miss our next video where we expose the shocking mistakes that can destroy your motorhome overnight. See you there.